Cleveland Film Talk takes you behind the camera lens and introduces filmmakers from the 37th Cleveland International Film Festival. The documentary filmmakers featured on Cleveland Film Talk today portray the lives of isolated people across the globe. Our first guest, Benjamin Greene, directed the film Survival Prayer, and Corwin Lamm edited the film. Benjamin, how did you come to know about the story of the Haida people in British Columbia?
I was sitting with my friend Olaf Ribeiro, who's a retired arborist from Kenya, and he said I should read this book called The Golden Spruce by John Vaillant. And I read that book, and it's a fascinating story. You can look it up, about a logger turned environmentalist who cut down a tree that was worshipped by the Haida people on this archipelago in the Northwest. And it was an eco-terrorist act that backfired, and he's since disappeared. And I was really drawn to the landscapes, the way he described them. And so I basically had already written letters to the community councils for permissions, basically when I finished the book, and decided to go there and got the funding to go there. Yeah.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm. Your shooting style for this film departs a bit from documentary or standard documentary in that there's a lot of landscape, not just photography, I would say, but almost a perspective of the land. And was that a conscious decision that you made when you began developing this work?
The film actually didn't come out of a strong vision per se. It was more inspiration that got us there. And through the relationships that we formed when we were there and the experience of just walking on the beach and seeing harvesting and taking part in the communities, the film was born. So in a sense, thank you for commenting on the pacing. I feel the aesthetic of the film, as much as we were able, came out of that experience. So
wonderful, yeah. Corwin, were you a part of this project from its onset, or was it more of a typical editor relationship where you came in later?
I'd say I started consulting for a bit, and then came on as an editor later on.
You two have paired together and made other films, and I'd like to know a little bit about the other films that you guys have worked on together.
Well, we went to Oberlin College, which is not too far away from here, so we're really happy to be back for the festival and to actually visit Oberlin tomorrow. But Corky and I paired up on a project to go make a film in New Orleans post-Katrina in a housing project. And so we basically stayed in a FEMA trailer for a week and filmed people that were holding out when a lot of people were dispersed across the country, wanting to come home. This project was basically started in barbed wire and eventually torn down. So we covered sort of that event on the ground, but it has experimental sort of flavor, but ended up being about 83 minutes. And that was, for me, the single best thing I did in college. I mean, I did a lot of fun things in college, but that was the single best thing, and it kind of stuck because Corky studied studio art and cinema studies, and I studied neuroscience. So I was able to do some neuroscience continuous education stuff after Oberlin, and eventually decided to make movies. And I think part of that was the experience of making this New Orleans film that we made, which is called Have I Got a Witness? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Excellent. So that sort of was your classroom then, that project?
I think a lot of the things we learned from that experience
absolutely.
has held true for the next two films that we made together.
We learned a lot down there. And like, it was a very experimental process. So.
What do you mean by that, Corwin, experimental?
Well, we had, we had a treatment, we had a plan, and then we went down there and things just kind of unraveled. So, and you have to deal with it, and we learned a lot that way. So.
Yeah. How much would you say your studio background, your cinema studies background, influenced that first film that you worked on?
In terms of studio art, I think very visually. So, on that project, I was behind the camera. So, I brought that to that aspect.
So I'm curious about how a neuroscientist or neuroscience student and a studio art and cinema studies student meet. I don't imagine that Oberlin has like a class that's, this is the neuroscience of Stanley Kubrick's movies. Like, tell me the story of when you guys met each other.
Can I tell the story?
Yeah.
I met Corky on Halloween in 2005? 2005, I think, yeah. Actually, 2004.
You guys are too young to be confusing the years.
I forget how old I am sometimes. I don't know.
Anyway, it's kind of funny.
Halloween.
It's kind of funny. He was dressed up as a, I don't want to tell you. I don't want to say.
I was an irresponsible pregnant woman. I had a 40 and a cigarette.
Yeah, yeah.
Not PC.
No, not at all.
Anyway,
is that what attracted you? You
actually.
had to go up and find out who is this kid who's dressed like this for
we had
Halloween.
a mutual friend actually, Anjali, who connected us because she felt we were both really into films at the time. And
okay.
Basically, that was for me one of the most stimulating conversations you can have is talking about films. And Corky and I had seen a lot of similar films, and so we had a good conversation then. And so we ended up working together, and we work well together, and that's why we continue to work together.
Wonderful.
So.
And as you worked with Ben's footage for this particular film, having known him and already worked with him, were there certain expectations that you had that he maybe broke when he brought the footage in for this? This is the third film you guys have done together, right?
In terms of expectations, I mean, I know his aesthetic so well. It seemed to fit, so it was really easy to go through the footage. I think I spent 2 days just watching all of it, getting to know it, but I already felt familiar with his style. And I think my editing style matches well with it.
Really?
So it was, it was easy.
Excellent. Corwin, I'm curious as to you coming into Oberlin and knowing that you wanted to study film. How early on did you sort of fall in love with cinema as a medium?
I actually, I almost went to art school, so I went in thinking I was going to be an artist. So I took a cinema studies class and just fell in love with Cinema 101.
Wonderful.
And then I wanted to start making movies also.
Who would you say some of your influences are?
Filmmakers?
Or you can use those who aren't filmmakers.
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, like the obvious ones, Werner Herzog, Bergman.
Right.
A lot of professors at Oberlin. Jeff Pingree, amazing. So
right.
He's a huge mentor.
Excellent, very cool. And coming into it, you had a love of film. Obviously, that's a connecting point. But what are some of your influences? Do you guys share some of the same taste in filmmakers?
In general, I would say yes, not entirely. But my favorite filmmaker at this moment is Philip Groening. He made Into Great Silence, which is a film that I feel influences me a lot in terms of having the courage to make a film that's 3 hours long and so slow-paced with very little dialogue. Very atmospheric style. I think that's a true influence on me. Other filmmakers I really appreciate a lot as filmmakers and what they do, but I wouldn't say have a direct influence on me.
The way that,
like Werner Herzog or Bergman, or there's a ton of people that we like.
And I think you did capture the atmosphere that you were in, and we have a very sense of the environment coming off the screen and enveloping us. What was it like on the shooting end of that? I mean, these are harsher climates that you were in. So, what did you find some of the larger
It wasn't
challenges?
that harsh, but I mean, we're out in the wind and rain on the shore, and we realized on the first trip that we needed boots to, we needed gum boots or whatever you call it to go out there, and so we bought some. Luckily, there was a store that had them, so we bought some, and so we had sort of the right gear. I had rain gear, and it was not all the footage is great because of that, but you know, we had a pretty good shooting ratio, 16 hours shot total. No, I wouldn't. I'm used to. I like going out in the woods and being outside, and so to me, it's just exciting to have the opportunity to be in the weather, you know, and out in the elements, and so it wasn't something that I saw as challenging. We were sleeping in the back of my dad's truck. He loaned us his truck, and basically camping for a whole month on the first trip and the second trip. But we had a lot of people who helped us out along the way, so it was fairly easy. You know, it wasn't like being in the Arctic or something. Yeah. So.
In the course of making the films that you've done, it's really been a learning as you do it process. What's something that was sort of an unexpected lesson that you learned while making your documentaries?
Well, I think the biggest one had to do with being a non-Haida, going into a you know, First Nation community, and not fully grasping the political sort of structures there. And I say this respectfully. I feel like it was complex, and we quickly realized that we kind of had to start from square one. That our permissions were not everything. Like we had to network on the ground a lot, and meet people through other people, and so that was the biggest learning process. And I feel that we went in the fall of 2010 for a month, and kind of learned that through the experience of being there, and then went back in the spring of 2011 and had a little more foundation to sort of get all the footage we needed to finish the film. But that was the biggest lesson with this particular project. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'd say in past projects, just being totally open and going with your intuition, and like not being afraid to go off the script.
Right.
As you find the best stuff that way.
Yeah, I didn't
That's
feel
excellent.
like with this film that I could go there and have a clear set agenda, because I'd never even been there. And you know, it's one thing if you want to make a film about an issue that you can read about in the news, but this was a film that was about more or less being there, the experience of being there in this amazing place. And to do that, I had to be there. To know how to do that, I had to be there and experience it myself. You know.
Well, I think you achieved that, and I thank you for capturing that, bringing it to us, and sharing it not just with Cleveland, but as you take it on to other films and other film festivals. Thank you very much for sharing their story with us and your film with us.
Thank you.
We'll be back with the filmmaker of In the Shadow of the Sun.
I chose the media arts program at Tri-C because I fell in love with the camera.
I've always wanted to be a filmmaker, and I just never thought it was possible.
One of the things that makes the Media Arts and Studies program different from some other programs is we really marry a study of the art of story and story structure with hands-on, real-world production experience. Just for an example, our students in their first year will get introduced to the equivalent of a 1-ton grip truck worth of media equipment, and at the same time, they're breaking down scripts, they're breaking down treatments, and they're learning about how the structure of the story is going to influence every other thing they do in post and all the way through distribution and marketing.
I was surprised by the quality of the equipment that the school provides, because it is professional equipment, stuff that you will see in the industry.
I was definitely surprised and overwhelmed with all this equipment that they have to offer. It's very exciting to be able to have that hands-on opportunity and to learn all the ins and outs of this stuff.
The faculty who teach in the Media Arts and Studies program come from a range of disciplines. So we have working cinematographers, and we have editors, and we have motion graphic artists, and of course they're all educators as well.
They are working in the field that we are all trying to get into, so they are very informative to tell you how things really are, so you don't show up to a job and are completely shocked.
The collaborative opportunities that are available to Media Arts and Studies students are limited only by their own pre-production, really. We have had students collaborate with dance, with theater, with recording arts and technology, and even automotive technology and fire training academy.
I've collaborated with some of the photo students. They can take stills and stuff, and they have cameras too. So there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate and learn more.
Another exterior shot.
The faculty is extremely supportive with our creativity, with our projects. I've yet to be limited on what I can bring to the table as far as story.
I'm able to be that artist. You know, I'm able to be the one in charge of that visual design that I want to get across, and I have a lot of fun doing that.
You don't really have to go to New York or LA to live your dream. I mean, it's right in Cleveland.
Our second guest, Harry Freeland, directed the film In the Shadow of the Sun. Harry, your film focuses on the plight of albinos in countries like Tanzania.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me why they have been ostracized?
Well, they've really been just heavily discriminated against for hundreds of years, purely because they look different and they're white, living in a black world. And in 2006, a 35-year-old woman with albinism was killed. Witch doctors had begun spreading the belief that albino body parts can make you rich. And people started murdering them, and it's led to 80 people being killed in the last 5 years in Tanzania alone. And these murders have now spread into neighbouring countries. There's been 13 killings in Burundi. There's been 2 in Nigeria. There's been others in South Africa, 4 in Kenya. So this is a real trade that's come up and started. But the discrimination and the beliefs surrounding people with albinism have been there for a very long time.
How did this story come into your life?
It was a long time ago now, because I spent 6 years making this film, but it was actually in 2004. I was making a film in Senegal about a completely different subject for the British Council, and I was out filming on the street in Dakar, the capital, and a mother approached me with her albino child, held it out to me and said, take it back to where it comes from, assuming because I was white that it belonged to me in some way. She had been kicked out of her house by her husband and his family, and accused of sleeping with a white man. I was incredibly shocked. I knew very little about albinism. I'd made films in sort of 16, 17 African countries at the time, but I knew so little about the subject. My aunt has albinism, so I was aware of the condition. And I came back to the UK and I spoke to people and realised how little everyone knew and how few NGOs, charities were helping anyone with albinism in Africa. But it wasn't till the end of that year when I was filming in Sierra Leone, I met a woman with albinism living under a cardboard box with her 4 children who also had albinism. And that's when I first had a conversation with someone really, and realised the kind of discrimination that they were up against. She had been kicked out of her home with her children, and they had been kept away from the family and made to eat from a separate plate and drink from a separate mug. And I was horrified really, and I really wanted to try and make a film that would raise awareness for these people because their voice was so unheard. And I set out really at that point to find where I'd make the film, and I found a farm in Senegal where about 30 people with albinism had fled to because they were being so badly treated in their communities. I found women with albinism in South Africa were being raped in the belief that it cures HIV. And then I found Ukerewe Island, which is the island in the film, a very remote island, 3 hours from the mainland in Tanzania. that has an unusually large number of people with albinism living on this island. And what they believe is that they were dumped there a long time ago. They've now formed an albino society to look out for each other, a place where they can come and talk about their experiences. And for me, that island represented a microcosm for the rest of Africa, for everyone that had the condition and was being severely discriminated against, because they were so isolated. And in 2006, the Albino Society decided to carry out a survey to find out how many people like them were on the island. Because one of the things is many women would give birth to, say, 4 or 5 children with albinism, but they'd be too ashamed to bring them out, so they would hide them away in the darkness in a separate room. So that's really the starting point for me, and that's how I set out to go and look for my characters.
It's interesting. It's such a politicized event or occurrence that you're covering, but your film really develops a portrait. Josephat, for example, is a character or a person who we really come to know.
Yeah.
How far into filming did you meet him?
It's an interesting one with Josephat, actually, because I had a kind of Josephat character for a while. When I first started the film, the man who set up the Albino Society on the island was my Josephat character. He was an amazing guy, just like Josephat, campaigned for the rights of people like him his whole life. And about 4 months into filming, he suddenly got skin cancer and died.
Wow.
So the film, as you'll see at the end, is dedicated to Leonard Masasa, that guy.
Okay.
So I actually started filming with Vedastus, who was the younger boy in the film, before I met Josephat. But as the first murder happened, Arith's murder in 2006, a 35-year-old woman, Josephat organised a protest, the first protest of its type, where people with albinism came out onto the streets and marched through the streets. And that's when I met him. And I think instantly when I met him, I knew he was the man to tell the story.
Right.
So that's how we met. And that was kind of beginning of 2007, just after Arith's murder. Yeah.
Your filmmaking style is one in which you really live with the people whose stories you're telling.
Yeah.
How, after the death of the first person that you were portraying, did you continue to pick up that camera and continue to capture the story?
Yeah, so I mean, as I've explained, I got involved in this film before the murders were first reported. So I got involved in it for the stories I was hearing about discrimination, the epidemic rates of skin cancer. I mean, they were the things that interested me. And I spent probably about 2 months before I picked a camera up, just living on the island, on the floor of the contributors in the film. Getting to know them, building close relationships with them, really so they could trust me. I'm not answering your question at all, am I?
Well, as you were doing it, you experienced the death of someone who, you know, obviously became very close.
I didn't know this was going to happen, and,
Right.
that I think just made the story even more important for me to just keep following it.
Okay.
And, you know, as those murders began to happen, you had a lot of news agencies just flying in, getting a story and leaving. And that was never what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay, and I make observational documentaries. As you say, I live with my characters. I'm not really interested in talking head interviews all the way through my films. I am about observation and a story evolving over time. Therefore, that's why I shot it over such a long time. Yeah.
So what did it mean when you met Josephat, and how did that encourage you or keep you going in the face of so much?
He always says that we were meant to meet, and the minute he met me, I was just the platform really for him to get his message out to the world. Because for so long he'd been doing what he had done. He had fought his whole life for his rights, and he was one of 35 children, the only one with albinism in his family. He was kept away from his brothers and sisters. They wouldn't sleep near him, they wouldn't eat near him. And it wasn't until he was 12 years old that he met another person with his condition. So really, I was just a platform, really, to get his message out to the world. And we just found each other, and it was just instantly kind of knew it worked. It really worked straight away. Yeah.
How did you come to filmmaking? Was it this particular subject, or were you working in film prior to beginning this documentary?
I was always a photographer. I had a darkroom from the age of about 12 in my house, and I just spent all the time developing photos. And my sister's a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. Another one of my sisters is a photographer, so I guess it's in the family. I went to film school. And I guess people often ask, because I've made so many films in Africa, why Africa? But my father lived in Kenya, and I had an uncle living in Namibia and in Ghana. And I first went to Africa when I was 5 years old.
Oh, so it's really a family.
So it kind of really got under my skin, and I just kept returning and making films. But I worked as a cameraman for a very long time. That's how I made my bread and butter, really. And I very much funded this film, certainly for the first 3 years of making it. Oh. I flew out to Tanzania. I would live there. I'd base myself there for sort of 4 or 5 months. But I would fly to Uganda, make a film for Action Aid or Oxfam, and then fly back to carry on, to enable me to carry on making my film. Right. So, I mean, I really lived on nothing for a very long time.
Very quickly, what advice would you give a person who's graduating from film school the way you had, and as they're moving into a career? What do you think you learned the most in your own transition?
Yeah, I would say don't make a film about anything that you already know the answer to, because you've got to go on a journey. I really believe in that. Also, don't become a documentary filmmaker if you want to make money. What else? There's so much. I think for me, being a cameraman, I think the biggest thing I learned was listening. I think that's just really underrated and so important. It seems so obvious, but it's so important. And perseverance, I think. I made this for the first 3 years. I had no money, and I really felt like giving up so much at the time. But then the BBC and ITVS International got involved. We're now playing at 48 festivals in 28 countries. It's been broadcast in Sweden as well, and we hope in many other countries around the world.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing this film to the Cleveland International Film Festival.
It's fantastic to be here.
Thank you for bringing the story to the world.
Yeah.
And it means a lot to a lot of people. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us with Cleveland Film Talk.